Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling.
Well, good morning. How are you doing, Jesse?
Amazing. Yourself?
I am doing really, really well. And I'm so excited that I finally have you on as a guest for Learning to Swim. We've been trying to coordinate this, and finally the technology gods and all the other scheduling gods and whatnot came together.
I know. I'm pumped. It's been a while since you were on the Jesse T show as a guest, as a podcast guest, and now I get to come on your show. So it's been a nice, beautiful return to the connection overall.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me about that. I wanted to ask you, because I don't know if I ever asked you when I was on the show, but how long have you been doing the Jesse T show?
So the Jesse T show started a little over 3 years ago. It started with an episode a week. We would shoot 2 or 3, maybe sometimes 4 episodes on a Monday and then have them ready through the week. And it grew to 3 episodes a week that we put out each week. And you know, we've had some really great success with the show, and it's just been a beautiful journey on meeting amazing people like you.
Oh, well, that's great. And so you are one of the founders of 46 and 2
Yes.
Wealth Advisors. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so 46 and 2 Wealth Partners.
Wealth Partners, sorry.
Yep. It was born of this idea where most people were never given, life advice when it comes to money, and if they were, it may not have been the most sound advice. And so we develop bad habits, we develop a bad mindset, we develop scarcity in our lives, and it's because we just weren't given the right tools. And so someone who came from a place of scarcity when I was younger, someone who went on this voyage to learn about the wisdom of wealth, to be able to be a student, to be able to teach people, it brought me to this place where I was able to educate entrepreneurs and executives on how to live life well, through financial planning, through other modalities, health and wellness, spirituality, but all kind of tied together through this concept. Everybody wanted to know how to either stop trading time for money, they wanted to live more abundantly, and so being able to figure out that along my journey and then turn around and help people do the same thing has been a really beautiful, life experience.
And I'm just curious about the name, because it's kind of unusual.
Yeah. So 46 and 2, it's got 3. So the idea was born of 2 things. So 20 something years ago, I was set on my spiritual journey, and along the way, there's these nuggets, from God, creator, source, whatever it is that people believe in. And they're just, a lot of times they're just kind of breadcrumbs, but sometimes things are just like thrown in your face, like pay attention to this. And through the years, I've really fallen in love with a band named Tool. And Tool is a progressive rock. They classify them as metal, but they're not really metal. They're just this beautiful quartet of some of the best artists I've ever seen in my life. And they do all different types of art. And one of their major things they do art-wise is music. And they are awakened, conscious gentlemen who have been on this spiritual journey of their own. And one of their songs is called 46 and 2. And 46 and 2 means 3 things. 46 and 2 means to do what's called shadow work. And so the idea is we all have a shadow. It's part of our psychology. Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud, they all talk about this, and really Carl Jung more than anyone. And Carl Jung is someone who I love in terms of just learning from. And he talks about your shadow. And it's a repressed part of your psyche where sometimes you may not make the best decisions. Sometimes your ego's bruised. Sometimes you have your pain body, which is something Eckhart Tolle talks about, where you're reacting to something because you were injured somewhere along in your life. And you have to go in and look inward and do the work that causes those things to come up for you. And this is called shadow work. And so that's the first thing. Is the idea is 46 and 2 is doing the internal work so that you can evolve and that you can grow through these issues that have happened to you. And the idea, the next part of 46 and 2, there's some science behind it where, and this is getting in the deep kind of, you won't go too deep, but basically there's these grids that go like miles below the earth and miles above the earth. And these grids are needed to support any kind of species in life. And back in the 80s and 90s, we created the Christ consciousness grid, where essentially we all became kind of like Christ conscious and aware and all these different things. And for a species to survive and thrive, they have to have these grids. And the idea is that once these grids come online, we can evolve as a species. So the idea of 46 and 2 plays into the DNA. So if you look at the DNA helix, again, this is getting kind of out there, but in the DNA helix, it's part of my symbol on my logo. It's left open. So there's a DNA helix. It's evolved together. So if we come together, 46 and 2, There's 23 chromosomes. If you do a 23andMe test, and 23 times 2 is 46. The next step in evolution is supposed to be 46 and 2. And this is when we all become unity consciousness. This is where we all become enlightened. This is where all become one kind of mind, if that makes sense. And so the idea of having that in my business was bring on clients, have them come in, we enlighten each other, we grow together, we elevate each other, and we evolve together. And this is kind of where that came from. And then at the end of the story, the end of the day, it's just an easier way to sell the company if it doesn't have my name on it. So instead of saying Tedesco Financial, it says 46 and 2 Wealth Partners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it is a lot, and there's a lot of, so I want to touch on a couple of things, because I love what you're saying about a scarcity mindset versus a mindset of abundance. I also feel like those in some ways have become what I call wallpaper words. So those are those words that we are familiar with them. They get used a lot. We think maybe there's a kind of a culturally accepted definition of those words. I think what I like to do with wallpaper words and with myself and with my clients is really ask, what is your personal definition of that? So talk to me, if you're willing to, a little bit about kind of what those words mean to you, and then how do you live that?
Yeah. That's it. So, I'm able to share this story in different places, which has been a beautiful part of my healing process. And growing up in Boston, I witnessed scarcity on multiple levels, from not having enough money to pay the bills, like have heat during the winter, and Boston's notorious for snowstorms, and, having to use the oven to heat up the house. And that led to one morning I woke up at like a Saturday, my mom was working and I was by myself, and I was probably 13, 14 years old and hadn't started quite working yet. But I remember waking up to the sounds of my dogs barking. And I'm, wanting to sleep. I'm like, shut up, go to sleep. Like, quiet. I'm like, I'm sleeping. Like, leave me alone. Like, quiet. And like, they kept barking. And I was like, all right, I have to get up and see what's going on. So I went to the kitchen where the stove was left on, and there was smoke emanating from inside the kitchen. And it was like up near the ceiling, and it was kind of rolling out in these like black little clouds. And basically I stepped over the gate where the dogs were, and I went into the kitchen, and I look at the stove, and I can see like a big fireball, what it looked like, or fire essentially inside the stove. So like, not a good move, but I opened up the stove a little bit, and like a fireball shot up to the ceiling and left this huge like burn mark and like soot and all this stuff. And so I called the Boston Fire Department, and they had to come and put out the fire. And so that was a very physical, very visceral experience of scarcity, where we didn't have enough money to pay the heat bill. And this happened with food. Sometimes this happened with certain places. And so I grew up in this place of fear, or a place of lack. And I always had this wonderful outlook on life, even though I've experienced so many amazing things, both, I guess some people would classify negative and positive. I've experienced some amazing things to where it's led me to this, beautiful abundance mindset. It's led me to this beautiful place of knowing where, I've seen some of the darkest of the dark, but I've also been able to heal through those things and become like a focus of light in my life. And so really being able to feel those things, experience things, that's what set me on my trajectory to learn about wealth and wealth management, was because not having money growing up, I wanted to learn how to create it. And so there was this whole kind of process that emanated from a place of lack.
Okay. And so what does your abundant life look like to you at the moment? What does that include? Yeah, so I'm a curious explorer at heart. I love to travel. During COVID, I know it's tough for a lot of people to travel, but I went all around the world and doing different things around the world. And, for places from, I think you're out in California, but Malibu, California, went to Peru, went to Mexico a couple times, went to, a bunch of different places around the States. And this was for me a soul journey. It was, sitting with shamans and doing plant medicines and learning about, the cosmos, and learning about the things that, are in me that can be brought to this world for the betterment of the world, or for the betterment of healing. And for me, it's just about the freedom. And that's what 46 and 2 Wealth Partners delivers, what's called happy wealth. And happy wealth is, everybody's definition is different. It could be more time with family. It could be travel. It could be, more vacations. It could be, better health. Because, if you don't have your health, no amount of money in the world is really going to matter. And so it's this full spectrum idea of living for me, where I want to optimize my health. I want to optimize my relationships, my business, my spirituality, my travel, all these things. And so what that comes down to is freedom of choice and freedom of time. Okay. So I love that. I agree with that 100%. I'm a big traveler myself, and it is that curiosity, right? And I feel like I learned so much through travel. And for me, one of the primary learning, takeaways has been just how similar we all are, right? I mean, you go to these just geographically or, topographically or culturally, 180s from your own life. And yet when you start interacting with the people, it's, we have such similarities and we just have these, we want good things for our kids. If we have kids, we want to connect with other people. We want, it's just really, I don't know. It's just, it fills me with a lot of hope, essentially.
Which is beautiful. And I think that's what those experiences are for. And for me, I've done a lot of like learning and studying and experiencing around, we are all, number one, we're all one race, we're all humans. But number two, I truly believe, and there's some scholars and thought leaders out there that believe that, especially in the spirituality world, that we're all each other, just experiencing life through a different body, essentially. And so like there's one consciousness, there's one source of connection, and we're all just different points of experiencing life in a different way, but we're all essentially the same thing. We're all related in a really kind of high level overview way to say it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I love the other thing that you talk a lot about, which is mindset. And for me, I think reading Carol Dweck's book, like back in, I don't know if it's been like 15 years now, it just kind of, I was like, oh God, this makes so much sense. So I'm looking at your poster behind you. I know that you are really, you are very familiar with a growth mindset. Can you, I think for folks who may not be as familiar, if you could kind of share with me what your thoughts are about that. And then if there's an example that you can just share for folks about where you were really able to put that practice in your life.
So your mindset comes from a few different places. It comes from your subconscious thoughts, your subconscious talk, your subconscious beliefs, which it takes work to dig down into what those are for everybody. You have to have that basis, that grounding point of, where do I come from? Where do these, beliefs stem from, and how do I show up in the world? And once you have that framework, you have a paradigm to operate in and say, okay, well, I may be coming from a place of lack, like I was, or I may be coming from a place of abundance, or I may be coming from a place of XYZ, whatever those things are for you. And then you can really start to put in the work and seek out teachers. And so for me, a lot of my mindset, there's a lot of like intuition that goes into it, but then a lot of it is real world experience from either myself or other people that can guide me. And this is how I've become a guide in a couple of different ways, is because seeking out people that have these experiences, specifically the ones that like, let's talk about a business owner. Let's talk about a business owner that wants to run a coaching business, and they want to coach women entrepreneurs on how to start up a consulting agency or a coaching business. So what I've done in my entire life innately was, when I was younger, I would always seek out people that were doing what I wanted to do and emulate them. And this started with sports. And so this started with basketball and baseball and football, and finding the people on the teams, usually the captains or the people that were like the influencers on the team that were doing a big job, and then surrounding myself and like picking up their habits. And so whether it was training, and if it was eating well, it was, going and studying tape or whatever it was, there were these success leaves clues types things around these people. And so once I started seeing that just as a kid and being curious, I've always been very curious and been a student, I would just ask questions. Sometimes, people, there's no question that's a dumb question, but sometimes they seemed like dumb questions. But having that courage to ask questions, to be able to start getting the information you're looking for. And then once you start going down this path of self-discovery, of plugging into people and aligning with people that are on this journey as well, then now you can kind of start really like getting elegant with how you show up and the tools that you use to show up. And so then what that looks like day to day is, for me, I love thermogenesis. I love saunas. I love cold plunging. If you go to my Instagram page, you'll see just recently I put out a post with my two sons, 7 and 5, when it was snowing a couple of days ago here in Georgia. And I'm out in the lake, like just cold plunging, because it feels good. It's great for your mindset. It does so much for staving off disease and so much for energy, and so many beautiful backed up sciences on just even cold plunging. because I like to do those things. Those are the things I seek out. So whether it's cold plunging, whether it's, sweat lodges and sitting in a much hotter than a sauna for, almost 2 hours and having a beautiful spiritual journey just with that alone, all the way down to psychedelics and plant medicines, which I've referenced before. These modalities, as they're called, these tools are things that can help people. Now, plant medicines might be like way down the road for people, or just maybe not in their journey. But breath work is something that'll take you there. Training your body, dancing, moving your body, doing things creatively. And I always touch on this point, and I'll say it real quick, but for those that are looking to live life well for a very long time, there's places in the world called blue zones. And blue zones, have you heard of this before?
Yeah.
Yeah. You probably, where in California are you? Are you close to a place called Loma Linda? Do you know where that is?
I know where Loma Linda is. I'm not that far from it, but yeah.
So that's actually a blue zone. And for people that are listening or watching this, blue zones are where the most centurions can be found in a concentrated area. So people that are living over 100 years or more. And what they're finding are they're using these types of modalities that I just mentioned, but they're also bringing in, and that's the biggest part I was talking about with coaches and relationships. And these are the things that help shape and develop people's mindset.
Yeah. So where has there been, because, I think a lot about, so there's mindset and there's a growth mindset versus our fixed mindset. Yes. And really, for me, kind of the real meat around the growth mindset, in particular to business owners and entrepreneurial people, is how do you frame failure? Because it's going to happen.
Yes.
And if it's not happening, then there's something wrong, right? And there's a lot of missed opportunities, is I guess what I would say. So how to engage with failure? So how do you do that for yourself? And then, kind of that flip side is building resilience, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the way that I look at failure is it's a teaching moment. It's a moment that you've either curated yourself or has been brought into your life that will teach you multiple things. It'll teach you about your resilience. Like you said, it'll teach you about a new way of doing things. I've heard this recently, and I don't know if it was Tesla or Einstein or one of those unbelievable brains of all the generations, but basically they said, I didn't find 10, or it could have been maybe someone else, but it was, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful way to look at it. Like, because the way that I look at failure secondary to that is, as long as you don't quit or give up, unless it's something you need to quit or give up. Like, I was doing drugs for 2 years of my life. That's something I needed to quit, be a quitter on. And I quit that very well. Never did that again. So, if there's something you need to quit and you need to give up on, that's going to be more healthy for you in the long run, then great. But if it's something that's beating you up a little bit, like if it's business and you're starting a company and you're failing because, you're still learning as you go, as long as you don't quit and walk away from that, you're not really failing. You're just getting on the job training. So you're just learning as you go. And most entrepreneurs, the best school they'll ever get is the school of starting a company, and the school of all that entails and everything that comes with that. And so just having the mindset, as we go back, because it's kind of the narrative of the conversation, the mindset around failure and looking at it as not a negative, but as a learning lesson. And then what do you do with that information moving forward is going to define that path for you.
Yeah, 100%. So part of my other thing that I'm always fascinated with are people's, what I call blind spots and bright spots, right? And so kind of the concept as I think about it is, we all have blind spots, and we have these bright spots too. And these are both kind of things that we may not have a great awareness around. So if I were to, survey a panel of your colleagues and peers and family, and what would they say, kind of what would be the collective narrative around what does Jesse do really, really well? Yeah.
Energy and people would be the things that I do really well. I bring a ton of energy into a lot of things that I do, and it's very natural. I don't even drink coffee. I like the smell of it. I like hot chocolate, but I don't drink coffee. And I don't, if I drink coffee, it does make me feel like I'm on a overt stimulant. Like, I'm really like, whoa. And so the energy that I bring in, there's this assessment, but it's really bigger than an assessment. It's called human design. And human design teaches you how you operate, and it brings in all these different things, and from astrology to science and data, like all these things. And as a human design archetype. I'm a generator, and I need to be lit up about the things that I'm doing because I have so much energy just to keep pouring into stuff. And so I would say energy would be one thing that people would say that I have abundance of. And then relationships. When I build a relationship with someone, it's for life in my mind, right? Unless something happens and we part ways friends and not burning bridges. But like at the end of the day, I really believe in people, partly why I started the podcast, partly why I'm a mentor and a coach, because I believe in the human spirit more now than ever, especially with COVID and what's going on in the world and all the darkness that's being met equally and abundantly by light in the world. And so at the end of the day, I think that energy and relationships, those are my gifts, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Well, I love to read. And so I always like to ask my guest a couple of things. I'd like to ask if you have a recommendation for a book for people out there who are listening or watching.
Yes, I have two. One can be applied at any level. It's a mindset book. It's a great story. It's by David Goggins. David Goggins is this amazing example of what the human mind can achieve. David Goggins, just for a quick overview, he was, he's unbelievable example of perseverance. He grew up bullied. He grew up, he's an African-American gentleman. He's a lot of racism thrown his way, especially where he was growing up. I think he grew up in a place called Brazil, Indiana, and he was like one. He always called himself the only. So he was the only black kid in school. He's just like, and his dad had a really, I won't spoil about what his dad used to do, but his dad used to really be abusive to him and his family. And it set him on this trajectory of like scarcity, going back to, a feeling of shame, of worthlessness, of lack, which I think we've all felt at some point or another. And he started using it as fuel, and he started using it as, okay, I'm going to use this to be my tool and my healing method. And he used it to go in the military, did a stint in the military, got out of the military, ended up going back to his old habits and like became lazy and ended up putting on like 100 pounds and had a really crappy life. And then he saw one night he came home from working the third shift, which he was working. He would always go to the gas station, grab chocolate milk and donuts, like just like a really unhealthy lifestyle. And he puts on the TV and he sees this documentary on BUD/S, which is, the Navy SEALs boot camp, essentially. And he's like, I want to do that, which, everybody who sees that thinks is probably pretty cool. I'd like to try that, whatever. And like, 9.5 or almost 10 out of 10 people can't. And so he ends up enlisting, going through this whole process, goes through selection 3 different times, which is crazy. And then long story short, he just changes himself from this couch potato, spraying for cockroaches, eating donuts every day, to like running ultra marathons at 200 plus miles, setting world records for pull-ups. He's one of the most sought after speakers. He's just so motivational. And for those that are listening, if you're not into cussing or swearing, he's probably not going to be for you. But if that doesn't bother you, like you'll see to the point, like he's someone who changed my life. His book called Can't Hurt Me is the name of the book. And it's an audio book it's both, but the best way to listen to it is an audio book, because it's part audiobook, part podcast, part interview. So it's like this beautiful amalgamation of information. That would be one that anyone can apply to their daily lives. And then the second book I would say, especially for those on a spiritual journey, is a book called The 4 Agreements by Paulo Coelho. And it just talks about the 4 agreements that you make with yourself, essentially, and how you show up in the world. And the things that will eliminate and bring into your life are so powerful. So the 4 agreements, and then Can't Hurt Me.
I love those. I'm not familiar with Can't Hurt Me, but it sounds great. I'm gonna download it as soon as we hop off. And I love the 4 agreements. And it's one of those books I just feel like is, simple, not easy. Right. And it's just one that I am always referring to, because, you'll be like, oh, okay, yes. And then, you kind of get a little, or at least I do. And then, it's just as a kind of closing note, what, a lot of how I got into my coaching practice was working with folks who were so good at their thing. I do a lot of work with people who provide professional services. And so they were great at whatever that was. And the business side of things kind of would just begin to really overwhelm them. And so I talk a lot about systems and structures and things of that nature, processes. What is, do you have any thoughts around kind of how do you create systems for yourself within your business?
Yeah, there's a lot. And that's like a whole nother podcast.
I know. I'm leaving us with a teaser so that we want more.
I would actually kind of change my answer a little bit and step back, look at it from a 30,000 foot view. And I would say just daily habits, because daily habits bleed into everything, whether it's relationships, business, self-care, health and wellness, whatever it is. And so what I've found personally, and from a lot of my, people that I either admire or friends or connections, a lot of daily habits of highly successful, highly meaningful entrepreneurs are things like their health and wellness, like starting off the day with movement, whatever that looks like for you. It could be yoga, it could be martial arts, it could be running, it could be lifting weights. Get the body moving, because this is how we move energy through the body. A lot of times if we stay stagnant, like we could have like a lot of heaviness and we want to be like kind of flowy. Getting into the flow is a big thing. But moving your body, having a routine after moving your body. So for me, it's moving my body in the morning. It's going for a cold shower, cold plunge right after. It's a few minutes of discernment or introspection to kind of get into the mindset of where I need to be for the day. It may be meditation. Some days it is, some days it isn't. But those kind of core principles for everybody, whether it's movement, whether it's meditation, whether it's eating healthy matters. Those are the building blocks that are going to allow you to show up powerfully in your business, in your relationships. And so if you take care of the engine, you take care of you, and you take care of all that makes you you, that's going to bleed out into everything you do. So I would say daily habits, daily routines, stick with them, do the things that bring you joy. Like for me, I started rollerblading again. And I just actually came from a rollerblade in between you and before. And so this call, and it brings me joy. It brings me back to when I was a kid. I loved rollerblading, and it's fun. I'm out there, I'm moving, I'm getting a workout in. It's like, it's not boring. It's switching things up. And so whatever it is that can bring you joy, that's a daily habit that you're going to look forward to doing, that's going to bring you so much more energy and so much more power in all that you do.
Oh, 100%. Well, I thank you so much. I can't wait to talk to you again, because it's like I'm still thinking about things that you said at the very beginning. So we'll definitely have to reconvene this, and, stay well out there. And thanks again.
Thank you so much for your time.
Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.